Now, you were pretty certain last week that Victor Gyökeres' Nick Pope incident should have resulted in a penalty kick.
One of the words I used was reckless. It wasn't reckless. The communication in this was key between the two, the VAR and the referee. And when they explained it, you think to yourself, I fully understand this.
Was it definitely a yellow card for diving?
It shouldn't have been a yellow card for simulation because there was minimal contact. The referees read this one wrong, in my opinion. Listen, what you get from me, mate, is honesty. I'm telling you, I just cannot see a punch.
Was the act by Fleming deliberate and violent and could he have been sent off here?
I think it's a yellow card for reckless play.
Hello and welcome to Men in Black, your weekly podcast where we dive into all the big VAR and refereeing decisions across the top flight. I'm Sam Matterface and I'm joined, as always, by Chris Foy, who's been very busy over the last couple of weeks. But this week, he doesn't feel as busy. It feels like he's having a little bit of a week off. Domestic top flight football set to take a backseat for the international scene once again. And the Premier League didn't leave us with as many talking points this weekend. But before we get underway with all of the action on the field this week, let's take a quick rewind as Howard Webb has come out to analyse one of the season's most controversial decisions.
Nick Pope brings down Victor Gyökeres and it is a penalty for Arsenal. VAR are checking it. Pope plays the ball according to Jarrod Gillett. No foul, penalty overturned.
This isn't clearly and obviously wrong, is it?
There is a slight touch on the ball, but that doesn't negate the fact that Pope has come out a little bit recklessly and collided with Gyökeres. I mean, I think it's a penalty.
PGMO chief Howard Webb says it was a good use of VAR to overturn Arsenal's penalty at Newcastle 10 days ago. He explains that Nick Pope's challenge on Victor Gyökeres was quite different to the foul that was committed by Chelsea's Robert Sanchez the previous week that saw him sent off. Let's hear how the conversation went between the VAR and the referee. Jarrod Gillett is the referee, the VAR is Darren England, and this is how they spoke to each other when they were reviewing that decision.
Show me a better angle to see that he touches the ball. I don't know if the goalkeeper actually plays the ball. The attacker plays the ball.
Yeah, the attacker plays the ball, and the goalkeeper plays the ball then with his right foot there. Any contact after that is normal contact because the goalkeeper just wants his foot. Play to normal speed for you. Yeah.
So I'm seeing the goalkeeper get a toe to the ball first prior to making contact. Okay.
Agree.
So after review, the goalkeeper plays the ball. There's no foul. Final decision, we drop ball.
Well, first of all, it's a great insight to be able to hear that conversation between referee and VAR. The little explanation, I didn't see a touch. Yeah, there was a touch. This is the moment that the touch happens. And Howard Webb then went on to give a bit more of an explanation in the studio. He said, at full speed, it does look like a penalty, doesn't it? And you can absolutely understand why the referee gave it from what he saw on the field. He gave it for a tripping action by Nick Pope. The VAR checks the penalty. Obviously, it's a reviewable situation because it's a penalty, a goal, match-changing situation. So he checks the penalty, makes sure that the decision is not clearly wrong. When he does that, he clearly sees that Gyökeres gets the ball, pokes it a little bit forward, but then, importantly, Nick Pope gets a very clear touch on the ball as he steps forward with that right foot and deviates the direction that the ball is going. And that hadn't been appreciated by the referee on the field. Pope then plants his foot on the ground. He doesn't drive it forward into Gyökeres. There is a gap, clearly a gap, between the two players after Pope has played the ball, and then the two players come together quite normally. The action by Pope is normal. It's not reckless. It's just a kick out towards the ball, and the ball deviates. No contact on the player until the ball has been played away. And then the contact happens fairly normally. So not a foul, and therefore a good use of VAR to intervene to show that the referee what really happened. Now, you were pretty certain last week that Victor Gyökeres' Nick Pope incident should have resulted in a penalty kick at St James's Park. What do you say now you've heard Howard explain it?
That's a really good analogy there, Sam, what what you've gone through. I mean, when I watched this in real time, I was with Jarrod Gillett. I went penalty, no problem at all. And when I watched the pod back from last week, one of the words I used was reckless. And that's what I felt at the time. But now having had the opportunity to go through this situation and break it down step by step by step, it wasn't reckless. And I gave an honest opinion at the time. But listening to how everything has been broken down, how chronological it was, and as you say, the communication between the VAR Darren England and Jared Gillett was so clear, and it explained everything chronologically what had happened. And Jared Gillett, obviously, who's the referee who acts as a video match official in Europe and domestically as well, was quite comfortable with that decision. So what it's done, it's given me a better understanding of how that process works and how we learn from these situations. And I can fully understand now why they came to the decision they did.
So when we were having the conversation last week, I mentioned that Joe Hart had broken it down in a similar sort of way, actually. And we at the time, probably, I was impressed by the way he broke it down. And I said that to you. And we both said how he went through that incident. We thought, well, he's done brilliantly to justify it, but we disagree with the overall outcome. And if you go back to earlier incidents, we've been told that a tiny touch on the ball doesn't negate the award of a foul. Are we now saying that it does?
I don't think it was a tiny touch as such. I mean, I think the words used were, he's played the ball. And going back to where we were, I think the communication in this was key between the two, the VAR and the referee. And when they explained it, you think to yourself, I fully understand this. But as I say, it's a learning curve, it gives us a better understanding of how they operate. And I think that's really beneficial from our point of view when we're talking about these situations as we move forward through the season.
Okay, so it hasn't placated the entire audience, and I can understand what Howard is trying to do by being transparent, by giving those explanations, like you said, just educating us on the thought process of the referee. But do you think that the general public actually are taking on board what is being said, or does it just make them more irate that a decision that they can't understand has then been justified?
It's very interesting. I think a lot of people had a really big opinion of this decision. And I listened to Danny Murphy on White and Jordan, and he said, I don't understand what the noise is about with this. He said it's just a penalty kick and an excellent intervention. So there was a lot of people who were actually saying that it was the right decision. I think if you look back, Sam, I think Howard Webb's been with PGMOL now, or PGMO as it's called, for about 3 years. And prior to that, there was no media communication. He talks about drawing the curtain back. He goes on mic'd up match officials. He does that regularly. He does press briefings. He even has referees on them calls. You probably sat on them yourself. I think on the last one, Darren England was on it, and there was a co-commentator was asking questions of a referee. He puts the match officials up there to explain decisions. And if you think about going from no communication to what he's doing now, I think it helps. But obviously people will have a pop, people will have a moan, people will have a whinge, people will complain. But the fact he's been open and transparent and he wants people to have a better understanding, then surely that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we have these off the record briefings, and we're not supposed to speak about them, and it's sort of kept under the radar. But one of the things that I noticed during one of those, and I'm going to break a bit of confidence here, is that a referee came on after making a decision which even he admitted was the wrong one, and this was over a year ago now, and just seeing him talk through why he made that decision, seeing him discuss how it affected him afterwards, made everybody on the call understand the process of being a referee, how difficult that moment was because of what else was going on at the time and the stage of the game. But also knowing that once he knew he made a mistake, when he went back home for the next 4 or 5 days, he was absolutely furious with himself. He was, desperately trying to think about, how he could improve and get better. So I think those sort of things, like you're saying, are really good to sort of put in place so that people see it. But I just think the clarity and the consistency also need to come from that. If you're going to say now that this situation is not a penalty kick, then going forward consistently, that has to be the ruling when that situation arises. Anyway, right, that was a review of Mic'd Up. I mean, there's not many podcasts that do a watch along to a refereeing show. But anyway, that's what Men in Black is for. We're going to move on to some of the key incidents that happened this weekend. We've got diving, we've got penalty kicks that weren't penalties, And we've got penalties that might have taken place outside the penalty area that ended up with a spot kick. We'll explain it all.
Penalty has been awarded to Sunderland, but it is very questionable. A throw coming in. Šeško's foot is high against Trey Hume, and Šeško doesn't touch Hume.
Why do VAR have to send him? Just speak to him in his ear and say, mate, you got that one wrong.
Referee, in case you can't hear him, saying there was no foul by the Manchester United player.
Let's go to Old Trafford. Manchester United beat Sunderland by 2-0. Stuart Atwell was the referee. The VAR was Neil Davis. Sunderland had a penalty just before half-time, but it was overturned because Benjamin Šeško didn't quite make contact with Trey Hume. There was a long throw into the penalty area. It looked like there was a high foot, and the referee, Stuart Atwell, after consideration with his assistant, gave a penalty. But he shouldn't have done, should he? Because it got a little bit murky after that, because there wasn't that much contact, Chris.
It's a really interesting one, but I think the outcome was a terrific outcome, to get this decision right. I mean, it took a while, didn't it? I mean, from Stuart Atwell's position, he quite clearly can't see what's happened in the penalty area, but the assistant referee, Konstantin Hazardakis, who's on that side, who's assistant one, has the best view, and it takes a little while to get there, but he gives information to Stuart Atwell. He conveys what he's seen, and the referee points to the spot. Well, quite clearly we know that the VAR, Neil Davis, recommended a review, and as you say, Sam, when Stuart Atwell went to the monitor and looked at that, the player was sort of holding his head as though he'd been kicked in it, and he hadn't. So in my opinion, I thought this was a really good intervention. I think the learnings from this one are for the assistant referee, that if you're going to convey information to the referee, it's got to be clear, it's got to be concise, it's got to be positive, and it's got to be accurate.
Because it is the assistant that gives the penalty.
Yeah, it looks that way. I mean, if you look at Stuart Atwell's position, I don't think he's in a position to see it. And where the assistant is, he's looking clear at that, and he will communicate what he's seen to the referee. He will, he'll absorb that information, and he's pointed to the spot. But I think realistically, if the assistant referee says nothing and the game's allowed to continue, then we wouldn't be seeing a review for this one.
Should they have given a yellow card for simulation to Trey Hume?
Big talking point this season, is it, simulation? I know we'll talk about a couple of those incidents later on. Not really. I think sometimes a little bit of contact there. Very difficult to caution somebody when there's contact unless there's a clear act to deceive the referee. What you're actually saying is, is that player cheating? You've got to be mindful of that. So you've got to be 100% positive. I don't think that was a case of simulation, Sam.
He wasn't trying to win the penalty, no, of course not. We hear the term high foot quite a lot. What does that actually mean? Because that was a very high foot in the penalty area. Was there any way that he could have been penalised for having his foot that high, even if there wasn't contact?
You could give an indirect for dangerous play, but not in that situation. I just think that's just a play on. It's not a penalty. Just let the game run on there.
Interestingly, the restart was a corner kick. Does this mean the initial awarding of the penalty would have been wrong anyway? Just explain that for us.
What happened was that the ball had gone out over the goal line for a corner, and that's how you would restart play in that situation, because the ball had gone out. And it's the correct outcome, because at the end of the day, you've got to make sure that the restart is correct. And in this situation, that's exactly what it was.
Right. Bertrand Traore, cautioned for simulation. He was running through down the left-hand side just before the hour mark, went past Sonny Lomans, looked as if there was a little bit of contact between him and Bruno Fernandes, but the referee on the spot very quickly booked him for simulation. Here is our simulation incident. I mean, was it definitely a yellow card for diving? And did Bruno Fernandes not make contact with the side of his hip?
It shouldn't have been a yellow card for simulation, because there was minimal contact from Bruno Fernandes on Traore. The referees read this one wrong, in my opinion. We talk about simulation a lot. We have done this season. Is it a clear act of simulation? No. Could it have been a foul? Possibly. Does it meet the threshold? No. I think what you have to do in situations like this, Sam, is adopt the third way. the third approach, which is just let play continue. It wasn't
that's
a
a couple
dive.
of times now, Chris, where we've had this situation where we could have gone the third way, but we've decided to book players for simulation. We were told at the beginning of the campaign that they're going to clamp down on diving in the Premier League. Now, are we being a little bit too over-eager looking for these scenarios? And is this going to continue over the course of the season? Or are we now going to backtrack because we've got one or two wrong?
No, you judge every incident on its own individual merits, and that there's so much to take into consideration with simulation. You know, is the player avoiding contact? Are they initiating contact? Are they exaggerating contact? These are all considerations. And from Stuart Atwell's position on the field, he quite clearly felt that he'd been deceived by Traore. I don't think he had. I think this was a perfect example of just let the game play out. It's not a caution for simulation. It's not a foul.
But if you need all that information and you can't see all those angles, it's very sort of impulsive to give a yellow card without having witnessed all of those different things. So therefore, should you not wait and use VAR slightly differently and ask for a little bit of advice from those in the booth?
Well, you can't, can you? Because if you caution somebody for simulation, that's a yellow card, and VAR relates to direct red cards. So in this situation, it looks, to all intents and purposes, from Stuart's position, that the player's gone down very easily. He hasn't seen the contact from Bruno Fernandes, and he decides to caution. But as I said, Sam, sometimes the third way is the best way.
Do you think this has come about because people just get fed up with diving? Is it on the rise? Is there more of it now and people have just had enough? So we thought, right, okay, we're going to have a clamp down on this.
No, I think at the start of the season, what we said, if a player is intending to deceive a referee to get a decision out of something that isn't there, we should really be punishing that, because what you're saying is this player cheating? Are they trying to win a penalty when quite clearly they haven't been fouled and they've given the referee a decision to make? So I think we have to be really positive with that. Sometimes, yes, it's a penalty. Sometimes, yes, it's a clear act of simulation, yellow card, and sometimes it's a play on. But, having been out there in the thick of it, they're really, really tough decisions to detect sometimes.
Okay, let's move on. Everton 2, Crystal Palace 1. Michael Salisbury was the referee. Craig Paulson was the VAR. Kristantas Uche got away with a red card despite a punch on James Tarkowski. It's the 96th minute of the match. Palace searching for an equaliser. There's a little gut punch from Uche on Tarky. Now, how is this not violent conduct? Tell me. Explain it to me.
Sam, when I watched this, I actually watched the game yesterday. And I watched the VAR check at the end. And I watched it again. And I watched it again. And I have to tell you, I just can't see a punch. I just don't. Sam, listen. Hey, listen, what you get from me, mate, is honesty. I'm telling you, I just cannot see a punch. There's a movement of the arm. There is no flinch, no movement from Tarkowski. The VAR's checked it. They've got better camera angles than I have. They've used all available. Listen, if he punches him in the stomach, I'm saying to you, that's a red card. I just don't see a punch.
How strong does it have to be to get sent off? A jab is fine, but a hook and it's definitely a red. I mean, where are we going with this? Come on. He's had a little rabbit punch at him.
If anything, there is a motion forward. It looks like a prod. Listen, I've listened to lots of Everton fans over the last 24 hours who've been saying, you know what, that's not a punch. And the VAR's got the perfect opportunity, hasn't he, Craig Pawson, to review it, to look at it. If he'd have punched him, Sam, I would tell you he had. But I have watched it and I've looked at it again and I just don't see it.
Are you sure this is not like a situation where it's the 96 minutes, the dying minute of the game, the referee doesn't want any more paperwork, we don't want to cause a fuss here, let's just let it go, come on, we're nearly there.
No, you can't referee football matches like that. You're refereeing a football match till you're actually going down the tunnel. As I said, I've looked at it loads of times. Yes, there's emotion, is there? I just don't see that at all. You don't agree, do you?
Well, listen, I must admit that, I mean, obviously there wasn't that many angles of it yesterday. It was the sort of very, very high grainy camera. From what you saw, I mean, I thought, this is going to be a red card. Clearly it wasn't. Anyway, move on. Arsenal West Ham 2-0 to the Gunners. John Brooks was the ref here. Michael Oliver was on VAR. Now, the penalty that Arsenal got in the 66th minute, was it inside or outside the penalty area? And just explain to us what this means, because when he's bundled by El Hadj Malik Diouf, he's sort of outside the area with the contact continuing inside the area. What does that mean? And where does the contact have to happen in order for it to be a penalty?
Great question. It was a penalty and it was a foul outside the area. I think this is what we talk about with refereeing, is we expect them to make good, strong, on-field decisions, positive decisions. And what's happened here is there is a foul. El Hadj Malik Diouf is tangling with Timber outside the penalty area, and that holding continues into the penalty area. John Brooks quite rightly blows his whistle and points to the spot. And what the law talks about is if we have a situation where holding starts outside the penalty area, as you quite rightly said, Sam, and you're going to do a referee's course, I can tell, and it continues inside, then it becomes a penalty. So what we've got here is a really good on-field decision, and that's what all we can ask of referees is go out there, look at the decisions, blow your whistle, make really positive decisions. And this was a positive decision from John Brooks. Good decision on field.
In cricket, we always say the line belongs to the umpire. Does the line count as inside or outside the penalty area?
The line belongs to the goalkeeper.
What does that mean? Is it inside or outside?
Inside.
Inside. So
Yes.
if it's on the line, if it's just a little touch of the tiny little bit of the chalk, it's inside the penalty area.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
You're there.
There was another incident where there could have been a penalty. Actually, it looked like a handball by Songatu Magassar. This is in the 34th minute. Saka has a shot, deflects straight up into the air. It comes down out of the air, and it comes down a long, long way. His arms were all over the place. I've got to be honest with you. I wasn't particularly sure this wasn't a penalty. There was no sort of VAR proper check, and it was described as sort of a running motion. That was sort of unconfirmed reports. But as it drops out of the sky, it sort of hits his arm after it bounces back up off the floor. But his arms have been flailing everywhere in the build-up to it. Why wasn't that handball?
Well, was it deliberate? That's the most important thing. I think the answer to that is no, it wasn't. Is it where his arms are expected to be when you mentioned a running motion? Handball, we talk about this every week, don't we? And what do I say? We're in a really good place with handball, Sam. I think if we'd have given a penalty for that, we'd be having more questions to answer than we would now.
Hold on. I know you said, is it deliberate? But actually, the fact is that we say if your arms are outside the natural silhouette of your body, or you've made yourself bigger, then that gives the referee the right to suggest that it is deliberate handball and therefore should be awarded as a foul. So if his arms are flailing around everywhere and he's not responsible for what they're doing, then surely that is deliberate handball, isn't it?
Yeah, but if he's jumping around and the ball hits the floor and bounces up and hits him, are you really giving a penalty for that? You've got me worried now, Sam.
His arm's away from his body now.
And the ball bounces up and hits him.
Right, okay, so if it bounces up, it's not a penalty, but if it bounces down, it is.
Well, not necessarily, because you can be running and the ball can hit you on the hand when you're running because you're doing a natural thing. I think what we're doing here is looking for trouble. I think we need to just bring it right back and have a real sensibility in the application of handball and how we punish it.
But you say we're in a good place with handball, and obviously I don't think that's the case. I'm completely confused by it, and so many other people are, but you seem quite clear on it. And what are your key principles with it?
I think what I would suggest with handball is it's got to be deliberate, for one. I think, is it where your arm is expected to be in a given situation? You know, if your arm is clearly away from the body and you're stopping a shot, you get a gut feeling of what handball is. And, we've mentioned we see different applications across Europe. I think we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I think in this situation, there wasn't too much noise around it, and I'm comfortable that a penalty wasn't given. I think if a penalty had been given, I would have been doing a lot more talking.
I always go back to opening night of the season, James Tarkowski, and that, I think, gives us the controversy angle. But I do still want those T-shirts printed. Chris Foy, we're in a great place with handball. Let's move on.
Buendia, really disappointing to see him go off in the manner that he did.
Yeah, it was good to see he actually walked off because he had a lengthy spell of treatment. It was Fleming obviously caught him with his elbow in his cheek. Just hope he hasn't fractured his cheekbone. Fleming should have been sent off, but as we said, Buendia walks off the pitch, so that's a really good sign.
Aston Villa 2, Burnley 1. Really late in the game, an incident here which left Emi Buendia in quite serious trouble, actually. He'd just received a yellow card for out-jumping Josh Cullen. He went up for a high ball. He sort of used his arm as leverage, and he got booked, actually, for using the arm in a 50-50 aerial duel. A couple of minutes later, he was forced off after the Burnley substitute, Zian Fleming, caught him in the face with an elbow. Buendia's coming from behind Fleming, and Fleming sort of goes like that and elbows him in the face. And after a lengthy stoppage, Buendia had to be taken off and they used a concussion substitute. Was the act by Fleming deliberate and violent and could he have been sent off here?
Well, it would have been checked for an act of violent conduct by Michael Oliver, but when you look at the incident, Sam, the referee Andrew Kitchen, who was making his debut in the Premier League this season, he'd done a couple of 3 games last year, he didn't blow the whistle for a foul. And I think when you look back at this situation, I think the minimum here would have been blow the whistle for a foul. And I think it's a yellow card for reckless play by Fleming. And I'll explain why. Because what he does have his arm up. There's no doubt about that. The pictures don't lie. And he's protecting space. And it's his forearm. He doesn't swing an elbow. He doesn't have a clenched fist. He doesn't strike him. He protects the space he's in and puts his arm up and he catches Buendia. It's not a play on, which we saw. It certainly has to be a foul, and I think it's a yellow card for reckless play.
But the fact that he did endanger the safety of an opponent, does that not mean it's serious foul play or violent conduct?
No, it's a yellow card because it's reckless play. It's a disregard to the danger or consequences. You know, is it a challenge with excessive force? I don't see a red card in this situation. It's just a midfield player who's protecting space with his arm up. I think if he's got a clenched fist and he swings his elbow and he strikes him, then we're in different territory. But in this situation, you know, you play yourself, Sam, in the middle of the park. Sometimes you just get your arm up just to protect that space and he catches Buendia. I'd have been surprised if it was red. And obviously, you know, Michael Oliver's sitting in the VAR seat and he's checking that and going, yeah, I concur that it's not a red.
Do you think, though, sometimes we just had the yellow card for Buendia, it was getting a bit spicy. Obviously, it's 2-1. Aston Villa have had sort of a difficult start to the season. They're just about to win a 4th game in a row. You know it's getting spicy. You know that there's a little bit of needle there. Do you have to be a little bit careful as a referee when that situation starts to develop, not to overreact in these situations?
Yeah, what you've got to do is you've got to heighten your awareness and expect the unexpected. That's what people talk about. You know, what's coming next. You'll often find that if a player feels aggrieved, that they may want to get a bit of retribution. So you've got to get in there pretty quickly. In this situation, it would have been ideal just to blow the whistle and stop the game, calm everything down, and then reset and start again.
Okay. Now, a couple of times today, you've tried to chastise me and said you're worried about me, so you want to take me on a refereeing course, but you also want to get me in the VAR booth. But I'm not doing it on my own. So what are the opportunities here for me, Troy, and the Big Oaf to come down to Stockley Park? Are you going to organise that or what?
Well, I've put the call in, and the answer was yes. So I think we need some remedial work. You more than me, and definitely Troy. So let's see what it takes us after the international break and get you 3 in the hot seat, that's for sure.
I would love to see Troy as a VAR. I actually love to see Troy as a referee in the middle, bearing in mind all the stick they used to give to referees. I would love him with a whistle in his mouth. It would be hilarious. Right, we're filling the Premier League void with a special episode of Men in Black. It's going to be out next Monday. Chris is going to answer your questions. So if you've got any questions for Chris, be sure to send them in. The address is on the bottom of the screen. We'd love to hear from you, and be sure to look out for that episode next Monday.